two superstars and one Cub all-time great visit Wrigley this weekend. Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On Cubs, your daily Chicago Cubs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Cubs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Sam Olber, I'm a lifelong fan, taking my passion into a discussion with you. Forgot that yesterday. On all things Cubs. Thank you for being part of the show and making Locked On Cubs your first listen today. And the best way you can help us grow the show is to listen every day, like the video, and comment anything below. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnMLB and use code all lowercase LockedOnMLB to win $50 instantly when you play $5. What a weekend. What a sports weekend in the city beautiful. What a sports weekend in Chicago. The New York Yankees come to town. We're going to preview that series in the second segment. We're also going to talk a little bit about some minor league developments in the last segment and kind of a little standings update. And of course, you know, the Chicago Bears play on Sunday, so that'll be pretty cool. Just a lot of buzz around this city. And if you want to come catch us on Saturday, pregame hangout, Matt Cozy, Sam Olber, Locked On Cubs, Saturday, September 7th, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. at Almost Home Tavern and Grill. Catch us. Just come say hello at any time. We'll be there. Could talk a little Cubs, talk a little Bears, talk a little life, have a good time with Matt and myself. We just wanted to do something to see some listeners and talk and, see if we can't get this thing turned around. But I wanted to start today's show off talking about Anthony Rizzo and his return to Wrigley Field, because I was disappointed in myself a few weeks ago when Javier Baez returned to Wrigley Field. I didn't realize that was his first time back, and I didn't feel like I did his return justice, and it kind of sat with me the wrong way. And of course, Anthony Rizzo is probably, of all the guys to make their return, not to make it a ranking, but probably the one that hits closest to home for Cub fans for a lot of reasons, mainly because he was the first one. Technically Starlin Castro was, but he was traded after the 2015 season. So the first one of the World Series winning core to get to Wrigley Field in 2012. I remember it very well because I was there. It was a late June 2012 debut. My dad and I typically didn't do this. We usually got tickets way far in advance, but when we found out he was debuting, we just decided to go to the game. It was against the Mets, I believe. Cubs won that game. I think it was 5-3 final, something like that. And, I remember before the game, I was nudging my dad. I was like, hey, what are they playing? I don't usually hear this. And he was like, yeah, it's some sort of, I don't remember the song, but it was like the start of something new, start of something big. Kind of instrumental. They were playing around the stadium because Rizzo was debuting. He didn't disappoint in his debut. And I just wanted to give him his due and his credit because, he's an all-time Cub great. And for me, when I think about the core guys of Rizzo, Schwarber, Baez, Bryant, Contreras, whoever else you want to throw in there, Zobrist, Russell, Lester, Arrieta, Hendricks, whatever. He's kind of the linchpin and the glue. And there's two words that I think really describe Anthony Rizzo's time here the best way. And the first one is consistency on the field. His consistency it's something we talk about all the time with this year's team and what they don't have. In the golden age of Cubs baseball from 15 to 19, these were Anthony Rizzo's numbers. I pulled a little new school OPS and then average homers and RBIs. So 2015, 278, 31, 101 with an 899 OPS. 2016, fourth in MVP voting, 292, 32, 109, 928 OPS. 2017, 273, 32, 109, exact same power numbers, 899 OPS. 2018, 283, 25, 101, 846 OPS. And then 2019, 293, 27, 93, 924 OPS. just remarkable consistency year after year after year. I mean, he had great years before that when he was coming up. But just such a consistent player on the field for the Cubs, and was a stabilizer, a phenomenal defensive first baseman. Probably I would go as far as to say maybe the best I've seen in my era defensively. But what makes Anthony Rizzo special isn't anything on the field. It's none of those things. And that leads me to my second word to describe him, or that describes him, and that's leadership. Anthony Rizzo was a leader, and it's another thing that I think this 2024 Cubs team could use that's missing. I know there's, maybe Hap's the leader, maybe it's Swanson. I don't know who it is, but there was no question when Anthony Rizzo was on the field for the Cubs between, I would say, 14 and 21, who the captain, who the leader was in that clubhouse. I know David Ross and John Lester also played that role, but it was Anthony Rizzo's team. And I thought Anthony Rizzo, my favorite part of the core, what was that they had this great personality where they understood the stakes of winning a world championship here, but they didn't let it affect their play. They didn't let it bother them. They had this great combination of being able to stay loose, but also understand how important it is to win one here and what that would do for this city and this fan base and people and families. And I thought Anthony Rizzo was kind of the poster boy of that. I thought Joe Madden was great with that. But Anthony Rizzo was so great at doing that, and so great at just kind of understanding the moment and, knowing when to keep loose, knowing when to light a fire. And that brings me to my favorite Rizzo memory. And it's probably not one of yours because there's so many on the field that he had, right? There's walk-off home runs, huge playoff hits. I remember a couple of walk-off homers, one against the Cardinals in 2012, one against the D-backs in 18. He had that big hit in 17. Heck, he caught the final out of the World Series. That could be a pretty good memory, but pretty good. But for me, and you guys know me by now, I like to think a little bit differently, and I'm not as into all the different statistics as everyone else is. My favorite Anthony Rizzo memory was, I believe it was mid-July 2014, and the Cubs were in Cincinnati. And Aroldis Chapman, ironically enough, was on the mound, and he was throwing about 102, 103, and he kept throwing up and in unintentionally at some guys' heads. I think it was like Nate Shearholtz or John Baker, a couple guys. It was at least 2 or 3 up and in balls at 102. And as you just saw with Whit Merrifield the other day, when you get hit in the head with 97, 98, in this case 102, you don't really care if it was an accident or not, right? Because your career flashes before your eyes. It's dangerous. And so you get angry. And so the Cubs bench started to get angry at Chapman after the second one, after the third one. And I remember this so vividly. JD said something like, hey, Chapman has to wear that. We know it's not intentional, but it doesn't matter. You can't be throwing up and in like that with that type of velocity. It's just, you have to be able to control it. He needs to let the Cubs get out what they're getting out. And Chapman didn't. He was laughing at the Cubs. He was kind of belittling the Cubs a little bit. If I remember correctly, he struck out Shearholtz, and then he kind of shrugged his glove towards the Cubs dugout like, oh, come on, forget it already, And Anthony Rizzo, between innings, came out to first base, and he took on the Reds dugout's first base side. He took on the entire Reds dugout. The entire Reds dugout. I think it might have been Alfredo Simone, and then it was Chapman, and he just kind of lost it. And I thought, it turned into not a brawl, but a benches clearing thing. And I just thought it was such a turning point. I think everyone looks at the beginning of the golden age of the Cubs when they signed Joe Madden and signed John Lester. And I think that's accurate. But I think if you really want to go all the way back, that moment felt like a turning point where, the Cubs weren't there quite yet, but they were coming, and we're not going to take anything like that. And I thought that was his first real moment of just exceptional leadership. And I just thought it summarized him in such a perfect way, and the leader that he turned into. So that's my favorite Anthony Rizzo moment. I'm really hoping that he has a great weekend in terms of the ovation and things like that, because he deserves it. Him, Baez, Schwarber, Bryant, all guys that, deserve ovations every time they come here for what they were able to do. But there will be baseball this weekend, and we're going to talk about that baseball coming up next. This episode is brought to you by Ibotta. Ibotta is a free app that gives you the most cash back every time you shop on hundreds of items, from groceries to beauty supplies to toys. So you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. Other apps give you points that don't amount to much. With Ibotta, just add your offers in the app, upload your receipt, and you can get real cash that you can cash out to your bank account, PayPal, or gift cards. Join the over 50 million savers and earn cash back every time you shop from over 2,000 brands and retailers, including Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, and more. Right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 just for trying Ibotta by using code LOCKEDONMLB when you register. Just go to the Apple or Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app to start earning cash back by using code LOCKEDONMLB. That's IBOTTA, and use code LOCKEDONMLB. The Cubs play the Yankees at 1:20 Central Friday, and you could hear every pitch of the Cubs' hometown broadcast on SiriusXM by searching Cubs on the SXM app. We are back here on Locked On Cubs, and we have a series to talk about this weekend. All the emotional stuff with Rizzo, very fair, very real, but there's a series to be played, and it matters for both teams. It matters a little bit different, a little bit less for the Cubs than it does for the Yankees, but it's still an important series. And we're going to preview it right now. And the first thing we're going to talk about are the pitching matchups. And on Friday, it'll be Lucas Gill, I believe that's how you pronounce his name, versus Wicks. Clark Schmidt on Saturday versus Javier Assad. Garrett Cole versus Jameson Taillon on Sunday. Pretty standard pitching matchups. Gill got off to a great start, had a hugely impressive May. I think in May his ERA was under 1. Since then, he's come back down to earth a little bit. Clark Schmidt's been good recently. Garrett Cole's had an up and down year with injuries. But the Yankees are kind of a fascinating case study for a couple of reasons. Number one is that they are basically the exact opposite of the Cubs in terms of how they're built, right? The Cubs are built on this idea of high floor. We don't have a superstar, but it's going to be different guys, right? Different guys each day are going to contribute. The Yankees are built around 2, and everyone else follows in line. And I think the biggest complaint this year for Cub fans would be we don't have that true superstar. And I think that biggest complaint for the Yankees would be we don't have a good enough supporting cast. And they're kind of mirror, opposites of each other, if you will. That's doesn't make sense, but you know what I mean. They're very different. Now, the Yankees have players that have the ability to be great supporting cast members. We just talked about one in the first segment, Anthony Rizzo, but he's been hurting off all year. Giancarlo Stanton, when he goes, I think the Yankees are World Series contenders. I think he's the key to their lineup, but he's been up and down all year. Torres has been up and down. Volpe's been up and down. LeMahieu's been bad. So they're missing the Ian Happs, the Suzukis, the Michael Bushes, the Bellingers. I still think if Cody Bellinger didn't get hurt, maybe the Yanks would have traded for him. And of course, we know what the Cubs are missing, and that's the alphas. And in my opinion, there are 4 guys, maybe 5, that are at the table when you're talking about the best players in the world. Those are Shohei Ohtani, Aaron Judge, Bobby Witt Jr., Juan Soto. And if you want to throw Yordan Alvarez in there, at least offensively, I'm here to hear about it. And the Yankees have 2 of those guys. Just all-world talents. I don't think we have to get into too much about them. If you control those guys, you win. It's a lot easier than it sounds. The thing that worries me, so the good news going into this weekend, I'm gonna fact check myself just to make sure it hasn't changed, but I think it's gonna be pretty pitcher friendly this weekend. Yeah, looks like highs of 67, 64, and 75, which probably means the wind's gonna be blowing in from the lake, which benefits the Cubs this weekend because you don't want to play those guys with the wind blowing out at Wrigley Field. thing that concerns me a little bit is it's been a little while since Aaron Judge's last home run. I think the Yankees have lost 4 of their last 6. In fact, since June, they're under 500. I believe they're a game under 500 since June 1. So it's not a giant task for the Cubs to win this series, but I don't like that somebody like Aaron Judge, who was just on a 61 homer pace a week ago, hasn't homered in a while. Hopefully he can just stay quiet for 3 more games because the flurry is coming. But listen, I'm excited for this series. Why wouldn't I be? You have so much going on. We talked about Rizzo. It's fun to watch guys like Aaron Judge and Juan Soto. It's fun to compete against them, and it's the Yankees. It's the gold standard of Major League Baseball. It's the Cubs and Yankees. I said it yesterday. When I'm talking about the gold standard, or when you combine everything, so winning, but history, tradition, fan base, legacy, ballpark, money, all those things, I think your Mount Rushmore baseball teams are the New York Yankees, Los Angeles Dodgers, the Boston Red Sox, and the Chicago Cubs. I think they're, maybe the Cardinals have a shout, maybe, but I think those are the teams, and you get 2 of them to match up this weekend, and then we get to go play at Chavez Ravine this week against the Dodgers. And as far as the Cubs go with this, I think that there's some interest here because these games aren't meaningless for the Cubs. We'll talk about that in a second. They aren't meaningless. So, yes, the Cubs are technically going to be playing spoiler, but if they were to really get hot, they would still be alive. And you want to test yourself against these teams, right? The Dodgers have been the standard. The Yankees are in a pennant race because I don't think the Cubs are super, super far off from being a great baseball team. But, right now I would consider them an above average team. And we're going to get a chance up close to look at a couple really, really good teams and see how we compete against them and see if we could rise to the occasion because, these are really important games for the Yankees and important games for the Dodgers too. I'm really excited about it. It's going to be a great sports weekend. Friday 1:20, Saturday 1:20, Sunday 1:20. You'll probably have to dual screen it on Sunday with the Bear game, but that's always fun to do. And, I think the Cubs have a good chance this weekend. I really do. Coming up next, we're going to take a little visit around the league and talk about one Cubs prospect that is making unbelievable noise. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. Prize Picks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps, on Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Get in on the daily action with your friends and become part of the Prize Picks community today. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play for $5. You don't need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. The experience of playing with Prize Picks is so simple and fun. Coming up starting this Sunday, 1 Caleb Williams passing yard gets you 1 win on Prize Picks every week in September. That's right. Only 1 yard gets you an automatic win every football weekend in September. 4 weeks of free W's. Don't miss this deal on Prize Picks because it's gone when September ends. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKDOWNMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. That's code LOCKDOWNMLB on Prize Picks for a deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks. Run your game. We're back here on Locked On Cubs. And I want to talk about 2 things to close the show today. The first one is around the farm, one guy. And that guy's name is Cam Smith. He recently got promoted to South Bend. And since then, he is hitting .414, .526, .621 for a 1.147 OPS, a .218 WRC plus, whatever computer metric you want to use. He's crushing the ball. And I know a lot of you are going to say, well, Sam, who cares? He's so far away from the league. And what does it matter? I'll tell you why it matters. Assets. Bill Simmons on The Ringer. I don't know if you guys ever check out The Ringer. They do a great thing every year. They just did it for football. They do it for NBA. They do trade value rankings. The top guys that have the most trade value, which is very different from the best players because contract is a part of it. So when you look at, for example, the Cubs, Ian Happ and Seiya Suzuki are probably the two of the best guys on the team, but they wouldn't be in the top 5, 6, 7 in terms of trade value or asset rankings because they both get paid a pretty good amount of money. They wouldn't bring you stuff back. But PCA, because he's on still his minor league, whatever arbitration stuff, he's probably the number one most valuable asset that you have. Meaning, if you call another team and you tell them, hey, PCA is on the table, he's going to get you the most back out of anybody in the organization. It's like owning a house. Once you own a house, how much value does that house have on the open market? Well, this is just, player value. How many players can PCA get you back? How many players? Matt Shaw would probably be second on that list. Cade probably drop down a little bit. Steele, assuming that the elbow is good to go long-term, which I believe it will be, he's on that list because he's not getting paid a ton of money. You can go, Imanaga's probably on there. Let me tell you something. Already, just because of what he has done as a first-round draft pick and exploding onto the professional scene, Cam Smith has now joined that party. If you call a team in this offseason and you have a conversation about Cam Smith, they are going to be listening and then some, because this guy is showing a ridiculous amount of upside, and it's the second straight year the Cubs have had a first-rounder, last year Shaw, this year Smith, that is just exploding and looking like maybe the offensive steal of the draft early on. So that's not a small thing that's going on. Monitor it. It's another positive of long list of positives that Jed has been able to do with the farm system. Obviously, the negatives are it hasn't resulted in a playoff team yet. That's a huge problem. But this Cam Smith thing is exciting. It's worth looking at. It's worth monitoring. And already, because potential and cost is so important in this league, he has already drove himself into a conversation as one of the Cubs' most valuable assets that they have in the organization. So great job by Jed. Great job by this young man who's just on fire. Just want to take you guys briefly around the league as it relates to us before we get to the weekend. Braves are looking for the sweep tonight. I'm recording this before the game on Thursday. Braves are looking for the sweep against the Rockies. Mets have won 7 in a row, already swept the Red Sox. It's probably why you've noticed the tone change in the playoffs from Sunday. It's that delicate, right? The Cubs probably needed to win 2 out of 3 against Pittsburgh. They didn't. And then you also didn't want to have both the teams you were chasing sweep, because the Cubs now got to play the Yanks and the Dodgers. And, you guys know the drill by now. But those teams are red hot. And, all I could say is, I've been looking at the camera. My hat looks really weird. I didn't know that. Nobody told me. Thanks. All I could say is that the National League is a lot better than people thought it was going to be. And it looked bad in May and June. But these teams, San Diego, Arizona, the Dodgers, Philly, Atlanta, Milwaukee, and then you want to throw the Mets in there as a 7th. There's 7 teams that are going to be trying really hard to win 90 games that have a chance. That's pretty crazy. So, I think it's good, though, ultimately for the Cubs and Jed, because Jed won't be able to get away with saying, hey, you know what? I think this is an 85, 86 win roster. But if everything goes right, maybe we turn it into a 90-win team. No, he's going to have to build a team on paper going into the year that looks like a 90-win roster next year. And, there's going to be some tough decisions there. Isaac Paredes is going to be one of them. Is he guaranteed a spot with the way he's performed so far this year? That's a great question. What are they going to do with Horner? What are they going to do with Bush? These are things they're going to have to answer, because last year I said in the offseason, I told Matt, I said, they need to build a roster where opening day, they're the clear-cut NL Central favorites. They did not do that. They were co-favorites with the Cardinals. Now, I think the lesson, seeing what Milwaukee's done, San Diego's done, Arizona's done, now you need to build a roster in 2025 that looks like a slam dunk 90-plus win team before the season starts. And then if you underperform a little bit, okay, maybe you win 86, 87, maybe that's good enough. If you overperform, maybe you win 93, 94. But it needs to be better, because the National League isn't going anywhere. These are really good teams. Let's see what happens this weekend. Cubs, Yankees, enjoy it. Enjoy the Bears. Enjoy all the sports this weekend. Enjoy the Rizzo return. It's going to be a very fun weekend in Chicago. Thank you so much for checking out this edition of Locked On Cubs. You give us 20 to 30 minutes. We'll give you all things Cubs with a laugh or two along the way. Be sure to hit subscribe on YouTube, smash the like button for the algorithm, and leave a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, and everywhere you get your podcasts. I'm Sam Olber, and this is Locked On Cubs.